but it was her that got the federal scrutiny on me. Then they saw that I was a vocal individual involved in Bitcoin education. I didn't try to hide who I was. I did business under the name Dr. Bitcoin on the local Bitcoin and Paxful boards, and it was easy for them to construct a case. I mean, this is the short version of the story, but it was easy for them to construct a case against me because I didn't hide the fact that I was selling Bitcoin, and I was ignorant of the fact that I needed to federally register because of conversations I had with state regulators that to the contrary.
Last year on my Twitter feed, I noticed a prominent crypto person make a thread about how he was unfortunately going to prison for a short period of time. And that piqued my interest. And so I looked into the Rizzn or Dr. Bitcoin case of a simple long-term crypto user since the early days who had done some basic peer-to-peer cash for crypto trades over the last few years, and for some reason ended up actually serving prison time for this. And so while he was still in prison, I communicated with him through this Twitter account and arranged to basically chat with him once he was out. And now thankfully he's out. And so here's the conversation I had with him on his specific case, on crypto regulations and crackdowns, and on kind of where the US justice and regulatory system fits into this new world of crypto dominance. And more importantly, do crypto people have to be scared right now? So, hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure of speaking with the one and only Mark Rizzn Hopkins, also known as Dr. Bitcoin. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. How about you?
It's going pretty great. I mean, I've been kind of investigating this whole scene of crypto and its interface with unfortunately, the regulatory system over the last few years, and especially because I'm personal friends with Ian Freeman, who's going through some of his own things out in Keene, New Hampshire. It's kind of a near and dear issue. And just randomly on Twitter one day, I noticed your tweet thread about going away for a while, and I thought, wow, this is it also did not strike me as a troublemaker or a criminal or in any way kind of a way. And that I kind of paid attention from that point on. I just knew I had to get your whole story on this whole thing. And so I guess that's what we're here for. So first, would you mind kind of introducing yourself and giving your quick background on how you got into the crypto world?
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, people call me Dr. Bitcoin. That's because I produce and record a series of help with blockchain and Bitcoin videos. It started out as a column back when I was the founding editor for SiliconANGLE, which is a pretty well-known in the space enterprise technology publication. So for most of my career, I've been a tech journalist. I've done other stuff as well, but I came across Bitcoin in 2011 when I was a tech journalist over at SiliconANGLE in the Cube. And it was ironically a buddy of mine that was a VP at Bank of America, but we were childhood friends. And he's just, hey man, you heard this Bitcoin thing? And we were hanging out at a coffee shop late at night, and he's like, well, I'll tell you what, I've got a bunch that I've mined on my computer. How about you pay for dinner and I pay for my half of dinner with the Bitcoins, and you have some to play with? And I was like, okay, sure. So that was my introduction to Bitcoin. It took me a couple of weeks to really kind of wrap my brain around it not being, I couldn't get why it was, legit or interesting or good for a couple of weeks, but I kept playing with it. And after that, it's been an endless rabbit hole, as it is for so many people since then.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because that was sort of my introduction. Was also someone paying me back for a meal. This time it was pizza, and that was 2013. So it came a couple of years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of, that's what gets
still an early year.
Yeah. So you got into it interested, and kind of what did you do in the space from like 2011 up until 20, I guess 21 or 2?
Well, I mean, as you know from those early years, like
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't really Coinbase and Cash App and Bitcoin ATMs everywhere. So
Mm-hmm.
if you wanted Bitcoin and you didn't mine it, you needed to find other people to buy it and sell it with. And so local Bitcoins and Craigslist were the places where you mostly did that. And so I've been selling and buying Bitcoin, peer to peer since those days, mostly as a way to kind of, as a journalist, understand who Bitcoiners are and how that's changing over the years. Um, so in 2016, me and a bunch of the guys from SiliconANGLE, we broke away. We started our own agency and some independent media organizations, and so we founded that in Dallas. And so part of our business became selling Bitcoin, and part of it became servicing Bitcoin and blockchain companies during that kind of ICO boom cycle that occurred from like 2016, 17, 18, 19. And so it became a little bit more business oriented than it was hobbyist at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2019, we sold that company. It was acqui-hired by a blockchain ICO company that promptly went out of business. And so a lot of the job security we thought we had went out the window right before the pandemic. And so I kind of turned to personally selling Bitcoin to, not try to dig into my stack and make some money while I figure out what my next entrepreneurial move was going to be. One of those hundreds of customers that I had accrued during that period of time from 2016 to basically 2020 was a woman who her information is now public now. Her name was Mildred Hoy, 50-something-year-old woman from Pennsylvania who represented herself to me as somebody who was trying to sell or just trying to buy Bitcoin for her husband's electronics business because they bought
Mm-hmm.
electronic parts for computer repair and phone repair from China. And
Yeah.
I know from personal experience, and maybe a lot of people watching this do as well, international wire transfers are a great way to get additional scrutiny on your bank account and possibly shut down. So that's a story that hung together. She gave me her ID. She told me all this background about her information, about the company and her family and all this stuff. So I had no reason to suspect her story was a lie. But it turned out, that she was a money mule for a Nigerian lottery scam.
Mm.
And she claimed that she was being catfished. It's a plausible story. I don't have any reason why to doubt that. But when she put together her plea deal, that was what was in the paperwork. She was being catfished.
Okay.
And the truth of the matter ended up being that she used my Bitcoin selling services to launder about $500,000 worth of Bitcoin, or $500,000 worth of ill-gotten gains into Bitcoin. But like I said, I had hundreds of, at least a couple hundred other clients. Most of them
Mm-hmm.
are hedge funds and lawyers and family offices and individuals and friends and family and stuff like that. So we're talking one individual out of a book of business. But it was her that got the federal scrutiny on me. Then they saw that I was a vocal individual involved in Bitcoin education. I didn't try to hide who I was. I did business under the name Dr. Bitcoin on the local Bitcoin and Paxful
Yeah.
boards. And, it was easy for them to construct a case. This is the short version of the
Yeah, of
story, but
course.
it was easy for them to construct a case against me because I didn't hide the fact that I was selling Bitcoin, and I was ignorant of the fact that I needed to federally register because of conversations I had with state regulators that to the contrary.
Yeah. So, what were the actual charges brought forth?
The actual charges were violation of 18 USC 1960, which is operation of an unlicensed money transmitter business. In 2019, I want to say it was like May or April of 2019. If you Google the Bitcoin Magazine article, they've got it all laid out nicely. That the one that Guy Malone wrote about me. But it's a regulatory memo written by somebody at FinCEN that said anything that is a digital virtual convertible currency must be regulated by FinCEN, must require a money transmitter license. Nowhere in that document does it say Bitcoin. If you Google Bitcoin license with FinCEN, it comes up with no results. And if you talk to state regulators, which is generally who licenses money transmitters, they won't refer you to the feds for this either. They just say, "Oh, we don't license Bitcoin transactors. Don't worry about it," unless
Yeah,
you're in New York.
of course. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's as a federal thing, that's got to be a little bit confusing. And for example, where I live in New Hampshire, there's a explicit law on the books that says that cryptocurrency businesses are exempt from money transmitter requirements, which sounds good, but at the same time, I'm not exactly sure if the feds are going to buy that either. Like, just because the state says you don't have to do this, maybe the feds disagree.
I mean, here's something I can talk about that I couldn't talk about in my interviews before I went in as clearly as I can now. But the one of the meetings that I had as I was trying to negotiate my plea deal, because I did get compliant in between the raid on my house, which was in October of that year, 2021. Or is it 2020? And then the in between the raid and the delivery of the target letter, which was in December of that same year, I went out and I hired a compliance lawyer, and I got compliant at every level in Pennsylvania, Texas, and at the federal level. And I, for reasons not important to get into, I inquired with the federal agent and the U.S. attorney on the case. Like, look, I have filled out this paperwork. I should be compliant to do business again, because I've now I've done all the hoops that you guys want me to join in, so I can at least continue my business while we figure out whether or not I'm going to take a plea deal or you're going to give me a fine or whatever the deal is. And they're like, no, it is the opinion of the federal government that you're not compliant. Meaning, and they wouldn't get specific, but the implication was because I didn't have a state issued license, the federal government still did not consider me compliant, even though I had federally registered as a money transmitter. Of course, the catch-22 is the state of Texas will not issue a money transmitter license because Bitcoiners that don't do, I think it's over $5 million worth of transactions, don't even register at the level that need to have a license.
Yeah.
And only if you're operating a bi-directional ATM network will they even consider it.
Yeah, so it seems like at that point, because they didn't like you, it seems like they decided to then block off your ability to legally do business.
Right. Well, but I mean, there's two ways to look at this, and without getting into a ton of detail, my time in prison has given me both perspectives. The one way to look at it is, I was too loud about my activities. I went around calling myself Dr. Bitcoin, and I gave some AUSA guy a layup in terms of a career advancement case, because they actually titled the case against me USA versus Dr. Bitcoin. And that was what they put in the press release and all this other garbage. The other way to look at it is that it's just kind of this is how the system works. There are two types of people in the camp with me in Beaumont. There were people that took plea deals like I did and were probably serving 5 years or less on whatever it was they were in trouble for. And then there were people that were there serving 10 to 20 years on nonviolent crimes, often white collar, because they said, no, I'm innocent. This is ridiculous. You guys are getting me on a technicality. They tried to fight their case. But the thing is, the feds don't lose when you go to trial. They simply don't lose. And so, and they will ratchet up the charges and add new things to it if you decide to go to trial. And so that's how you end up serving 25 years on what should have been like a 6-month or a 12-month case. And there was numerous examples of people there in the camp with me in that situation. So the second way of looking at it is like they were going to get me for something because that's how the feds operate.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like this sort of opens a much greater, potentially many hours long, if not days long, conversation about all the issues with the justice system in the U.S., which I'm sure, a lot of people have kind of gone over ad nauseum. But from my understanding, obviously maybe playing a little dumb on this for the purposes of of educating the audience, but selling crypto peer to peer for cash is not a crime, correct? You don't need a license to just, like, if I got $100 worth of Bitcoin, someone says, hey, I want to play around with that. And then they want to, just like a friend, he gives me $100, I give him that.
Strictly speaking, it is a crime.
Yes.
Strictly speaking, transacting $5 for cash of crypto is a crime in the eyes of the feds. If to hear the agent who spoke to me about it, to hear the AUSA prosecuted me, I was a bad guy because I transacted. They literally sat me down and said, "We know everybody you transact with has got to be a scumbag. We want to know about everybody you do business with because everybody in your book of business is probably doing bad things, and we want to take them down." They simply have the view that crypto users are criminals.
Yeah, so now that's where the hair split is. So they think that crypto users are criminals, absolutely. But as far as like the law is concerned, if you do a pure like, let's say a one-off peer-to-peer transaction, because there's been local Bitcoins, that not anymore, obviously. There's been Wall of Coins was a thing. There's been, Paxful. There've been so many of these things operating out in the open with individuals trading, and almost none of them even get targeted. It seems like it's a very legal thing to do, to just on a very peer-to-peer basis just trade a small amount of cryptocurrency for cash to just a friend or someone.
Do not confuse have not been prosecuted with something that is legal. There's a lot of people that buy weed every single day and smoke personal use amounts every single day, but that is a federal crime every time it's done. Just because it is generally accepted in the state that you live in, which is most states at this point, does not make it not a federal crime. And anyone who has any amount of weed can go to a federal prison for any amount of time the feds choose to put them there for. So this is the same exact situation that we find ourselves in with cryptocurrency. Anybody transacting any amount of cryptocurrency at any level is committing a federal crime. It's the feds that choose not to go after them most of the time.
So it's not just are you operating a business out of this? Is there a certain volume thing? That kind of stuff just gets their attention, right? But the whole thing is illegal according to them.
In their strict interpretation of that guidance memo, which I can give you the link as soon as we're off the air. I'll give you the link to that. You can review it and make your own determination. But the strict interpretation of that is that any peer-to-peer transactions that involve cash, dollar bills, it's illegal to do it without one party, the selling party, the party that's selling Bitcoin, registering as a money transmitter.
Yeah, that's pretty insane of a requirement. So on the overall kind of view of this, right, it seems like, first of all, this is almost no one doing this. Almost everyone, if I could say maybe everyone, every single person in the U.S. who is a cannabis user or has been over the many years knew it was illegal, right? Just knew it was illegal, but there was a, well, everyone does it, so it's okay. But just don't let the cops catch you kind of thing.
Right.
With transacting cryptocurrency peer-to-peer for cash, just like a very basic kind of thing, that is something that I have a feeling that the vast majority, if not 99.95%, believe it is perfectly legal and have no idea of anything like that. Do you think that's kind of a fair assessment?
I would say that's a fair assessment. That's what most people are going to say they believe, or would agree with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a certain way, I guess is your message to people that just be very careful what you're doing now, because this could turn very different. I mean,
I think I've got multiple messages for people. The number one message I have, like beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I think you retweeted it or liked it or whatever. There's a specific bill that's being introduced that would at least close the loophole on ordinary transactions, which is if there is no custody of Bitcoin, or sorry, of customer funds, custody of customer funds of any kind happening in a crypto transaction, it would close the loophole and say federal law does not require a money transmitter license in any circumstance. It's called the DeFi Regulatory Certainty Act.
Yeah.
I think it's a Tom Emmer bill, but don't quote me on that. It's in. I can give you that. We can dig up that link after we get done talking. That's like number one in my mind. We need to, if it's not this bill, we need to close this loophole. It's an insane loophole that allows the DOJ way too much latitude to arbitrarily and capriciously enforce the law. The second thing, yes, is awareness. Montana, Texas, even California, and certain East Coast like Delaware, these are all states that are literally manufacturing felons by attracting blockchain and crypto businesses to their state by trying to open up the laws and say, okay, you can come here and be a crypto business and we'll give you tax benefits or mining, energy rate discounts or whatever. I love that. Keep doing that at the state level. But for the love of God, please, these state regulators and these state legislatures need to include an education piece in that we need to inform these large scale businesses that can't hide their identity, that can't hide behind anonymity and pseudonymity, that they need to be federally compliant. Otherwise, it's going to be just like Gensler going after Coinbase and Binance for spurious reasons, something about securities law, and probably going to have some red notices out on them at some point too when they start fighting their case. This should not be a thing, especially if we know ahead of time that it's just a free form. This is not even a form that costs any money to fill out at the federal level. It's a free form you can fill out to make yourself compliant, and you can look backwards 6 months. There's a forgiveness period, so you can file the paperwork on previous 6 months worth of transactions to make yourself federally compliant. I don't want to see anybody else go through what I had to go through for this. This is silly.
Yeah. So when we're talking about that, there's this massive gulf between what is technically able to be prosecuted, which is kind of where you're at, unfortunately, and where everyone else is. And why do you think there's that giant gap? Why do you think out of as one could call it, the target-rich environment for regulators and for law enforcement, or why do you think that there's so few people targeted today?
Well, number one, I was part of an initial sweep of people that were targeted for this activity. The same week that I was raided, there were 2 other people in the camp with me, and probably many more across the country in different facilities that were also raided on that same exact day for 18 USC 1960 violations. Of the 2 other people in the camp, one of them was Bitcoin, and one of them was just a vanilla credit card transactor. There's one other noteworthy individual that was indicted and targeted and raided in the same week that I was, John McAfee. So there was clearly a DOJ-wide directive to take down what they viewed as not just high profile, but high profile within the scope of where they operated, folks that would create like some FUD, I guess, like for lack of a better word. Yeah, have a chilling effect on the industry for sure. Because as we see now, the choke point 2.0 going on, if you chill what's happening in the OTC markets, then people are going to go, oh, well, I'll go back to Coinbase and Binance and Cash App because at least that's safe. And now they have everybody over here. And that's an easier thing for them to clamp down on because these guys are trying to be regulatory compliant. They're trying to file paperwork on every single thing.
It's a honeypot.
Exactly. It's exactly what it is. It's you can't choke point something if you've got all these peer-to-peer transactions going on, but you can if they're going through like 3 banks.
Yeah. So on a greater kind of perspective, right? Obviously early days crypto people, which is, there's a few of us around, right? Who we all kind of had a little bit of a expectation that this is like a this is a tool to potentially resist centralized authority in some kind of a way, like hypothetically, that
Yeah.
this is good stuff for that purpose, and then always expecting some sort of a crackdown or something, and then there's also the of course the Silk Road, and then Ross Ulbricht, which of course I proudly repping a Free Ross shirt today.
Nice.
That whole thing is like it was people's minds of like they're gonna fight us like right away. This is gonna be an ugly chapter in our history, and then at some point we're gonna get over to the golden era of financial self sovereignty. But there's been this giant, I guess, it's very the with the notable exception of people that you've mentioned and as well as yourself. There's been very little up until the last couple of years done by regulators, legislators, and stuff like that to really clamp down on cryptocurrency. They just kind of been sitting on their hands for many years. Something I did not expect personally, and then now they're starting to wake up and do some things. Why do you think it's been that long?
I mean, if anybody that's been on Bitcoin talk forums or r/Bitcoin, they recognize the quote: first they ignore you, then they mock you, and then they fight you. We've just been in those first two phases for the golden years. Unfortunately, that has bred, because I'm probably a rare person for maybe this audience, the audience of Ian and folks that circulate it. But actually, you and I are pretty much aligned on this stuff. I'm a guy that plays in the Ethereum ecosystem, even though I was a Bitcoin guy.
Yeah.
And I'm agnostic as long as it's not a true shit coin. I like to play around with new technology. That's my thing. So, but what that has certainly bred this golden era of being mocked and ignored is a bunch of fintech guys that infiltrated the world of Ethereum that weren't really true cypherpunks that said, oh yeah, CBDCs are cool. Let's be all compliant. We'll just be the new thing, and we'll work with governments. And they didn't necessarily build things as decentralized as they needed to be, and they didn't really kind of build in that culture of you got to wait. The other shoe will drop. Like that wasn't an expectation for most of the last 7 years of what I've seen emerge in the crypto ecosystem. So yeah, I think that's really. I'm sorry. What was the question? I got off on a different tangent there, but I'm not sure I'm answering your question. But that's kind of the vibe of the show.
Keep going on the tangent because I like what I'm hearing so far.
Well, yeah. I think that's part of the problem, though. I think that's part of the problem. So the research that I did on my case, I think I'm coming back to the actual question here. Why has there not been a lot of prosecutions aside from the being ignored and mocked? Is regulators didn't really even know how to come at it. And I've done consulting for a lot of different government organizations and government adjacent organizations over my career. FDIC, I've done work for. During the ICO years, I had to interface with the SEC a lot, more than I ever wanted to. I've spent probably like $6 million on SEC lawyers over my lifetime. Oof. Completely wasted money.
Of course.
Completely wasted money. But like these up until I would say the era of Gensler forward, you could honestly say that their ham-fisted approach to crypto just truly came from a place of ignorance. I think the Gensler era marks a period of time, and the era under which I was prosecuted. So the
new era,
the last couple years of Trump, it marks an era of sophistication and malevolence. Like they realize that while it is not currently a threat comparatively to the rest of the ecosystem, like it's what's the size of the global GDP versus the almost $2 trillion in crypto, right? It's not a threat, but the genie is out of the bottle, the toothpaste is out of the tube, so they've got to do something. And so they start this this 3D chess garbage that they've been doing for the last 4 years, to pen everybody in and shut it down the best way they know how. I don't think they're going to be successful. I think this is the wrong approach, but it's not unlike government to do this anytime innovation and disruption occurs.
Yeah, I guess kind of we saw that with the Uber whole situation when they just had
Right.
no idea what to do with that, started cracking down, didn't really work, and then they figured out a compromise that both parties could be satisfied with. And unfortunately, with this negotiation phase between the people and their rulers, there's people that fall through the cracks in really bad ways, and it's kind of unfortunate. Where do you see the? You mentioned about obviously right now they're trying to corral people into centralized honeypots so that they can then make sure to either shut those down or otherwise just make sure they control the flow in and out of the crypto world entirely. Other than that, where do you see, I guess, regulations cropping up over the next 5 to 10 years in, especially the U.S. and like the developing world, the developed world?
I mean, the danger zones have to do, in my opinion, with how the law is going to start treating DAOs. Obviously, securities law is a big issue, but that's completely led by, it's a one-man crusade. Unfortunately, it's a very powerful one man. I mean, once Gensler finds himself out of power, I think the quixotic crusade against crypto as a security will die off, because there's so many people around him in that organization that disagree with him. So the bigger issues to me are, how will DAOs be treated from a legal perspective? That's a huge vulnerability, because the prevailing legal opinion right now is, if you're a DAO and you don't have some sort of corporate shell around your DAO, you're going to be treated as a limited partnership, which means every individual token holder can be sued or held liable for any missteps of the organization as a whole. That's a huge problem, a huge vulnerability. And it's not solved by creating a corporate shell, in my opinion, because that just gives the government a footprint to attack. Of course, there's smart legal minds that will disagree with me on that point, but that's probably a point for another time.
Yeah, of
That's a
course.
major issue, though. And honestly, either we need to there needs to either be regulation and legislation around that, or we need to innovate past it. And there's a lot of interesting organizations that, at least in my field of vision, like Lunar DAO, that and LexPunk DAO, that are trying to create tools and propagate the usage of existing tools that will give DAO members and crypto members back their anonymity, because ultimately that is the solution. They can't prosecute what they can't find.
Yeah.
The big lesson of being in the BOP, and you can also say perhaps is even the lesson of being subject to the DOJ, is it's not don't break the law. The average individual commits 3 felonies a day. You can go to prison for 10 years for any. I promise you can go to prison for 10 years for something you did today. I don't know what it is, but you did it. No, the lesson is, don't bring heat down on yourself when you're in prison. If you keep your nose too clean, the guards will target you because they're doing their hustles just like the inmates are doing their hustles. So you got to be a little bit dirty to survive in prison, but they don't want you doing egregiously illegal things. They just want you they just want to know, they want you doing things they know they can get you on at any point, so you stay subject to their rule. And that's how that system is engineered. So what the rule is, what you learn is, don't bring heat down on those you're around. Don't bring heat down on the facility you're in. Don't bring heat down on the people that you run with. Don't bring heat down on the people that you have to bunk up with. DOJ has the same thing. You're committing 3 felonies a day. You can go to prison for 10 years for something you did today. Don't bring heat down on yourself. Fortunately for us, we know how to use crypto and privacy tools. And that's for those of us who haven't been doxxed by a federal a federal indictment or a federal prosecution, we can try not to bring heat down on ourselves by remaining anonymous and remaining pseudonymous as much as possible.
Yeah. How did you bring heat on yourself that you couldn't see? I know you mentioned being outspoken a little bit, but
I've always
what
regarded myself as a
specifically?
crypto anarchist, and I've never shied away from that term, even though it's probably even especially during the Trump years, anarchist is not a popular word because he very famously termed a lot of the people that he disagreed with as anarchists, even though it was a misapplication of the term.
Hmm.
But that triggered uh, a lot of research and activity within the DOJ to go after people that term themselves as anarchists. So that was probably mistake number one. Mistake number two was doing business as an OTC trader under the same name that I podcasted under, and trying to transfer that reputation into the reputation of being an OTC trader. It would have been smarter for me to OTC trade under a completely anonymous name if I was going to do so, because I honestly think a big part of it was the fact that Dr. Bitcoin sounds really good as part of a headline. Like, you know, the guy who brought the case against me, named Sid Modi, uh, he left the AUSA's office 2 weeks before my sentencing to go join a big law firm, presumably to go lobby for crypto based off of my case and two others. It's strictly about career advancement for him.
Of course.
Yeah. So, and I'm not saying I'm famous. Most of your audience has probably never heard of me. I'm maybe regionally famous in the crypto circles here in Texas, but when you put Dr. Bitcoin in a headline, people are like, "Oh, I think I've heard of that guy. It sounds familiar, at least, And that's what they thought there at the AUSA's office. Like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna go after this guy. It's gonna make a great headline."
Yeah, so like a publicly known, maybe micro celebrity who happened to be involved in this easy to prosecute domain. So that was the deadly combination.
Right. Well, and the bigger thing, and this is specific to my case, but it's also generally applicable. The way they get you, because it sounds like, okay, Mark, why didn't you fight this thing? Right? I've actually, that was like the most common response that I got from like real crypto degens in the comments of that thread that you noticed me off of. It's like, look, this seems like a layup, right? Fight this thing, and money is speech, right? You should be able to have free speech, ones and zeros. So the way they strong armed me was they threatened a conspiracy case with the crimes of not just the Nigerian, not just the woman that I transacted with, but the Nigerian that she transacted with, and my wife, who just so happened to be on my bank account and had committed no other crime than being married to me. And so they said, not only are we going to come after you with conspiracy on these charges that maybe you did or didn't do, but we think we can make the case of, but we're also going to go after your wife. Conspiracy, that's easy 20 years. And you don't win that. I was in the BOP with lots of guys. I was in BOP with a guy, I won't mention his name. Went in when he was, I mean, it's a tragic story. 17 years old on a weed conspiracy case. He was in his late 40s on his last year of his sentence. They stole his entire life from him because he decided to fight it. You just don't win against the BOP. They don't win against the DOJ. So they basically, coerced me into taking a deal, as they do with just about everybody that goes through the system.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there is, for all the grimness in your particular case, there's a great way of looking at it, which is you're here now. And I remember it didn't seem like that long ago when you first tweeted that you were going to take a vacation for a while. And so, all things considered, that seems like a pretty, it's a terrible deal, but it's a good deal compared to the one you could have gotten, I guess.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I hate to say I'm lucky, but I am lucky. I'm lucky that I found Bitcoin in 2011, and I'm lucky that I was able to shield my assets. I'm lucky that the DOJ didn't want to come after my assets because they very often like to take all the money away from the people they go after. And fortunately for me, there were no aggrieved parties in my case, so they couldn't make a case for restitution. But yeah, it could have been much worse. I was surrounded by a ton of hard luck cases at the camp there.
Yeah. So moving forward, obviously, how much improvement do you think can be done at the state level, and how much do you think needs to be done by like actual federal reform?
I think that we are as a lobby or as a culture, somewhat lucky that there are some crypto, some people that are fond of crypto in our state legislatures and at the federal level as well. Anytime one of these guys offers up, like Loomis or any of the other ones, offers up a bill that is supportive of our industry, even if it is, even if it's about Ripple, we should apply as much pressure as possible because we should be in solidarity, all of us crypto people. We're about to be, a persecuted group of people. Not about to be. We are a persecuted group of people right now. We need to recognize that. So anything that helps any one of us helps all of us. Ripple winning its case. I mean, I'm on the record. Like, you can look at my videos. I'm on the record talking crap about Ripple. So I'm not a Ripple fan. But anything, even Ripple winning its case right now is good for crypto. Very good for crypto. Same thing. I mean, we just saw what happened with Library, which is,
Another good friend of mine.
Yeah. So there's a lot that can be done. We need to apply pressure in all the ways that are traditionally viable for applying pressure to our elected officials because the bureaucrats are accountable to nobody. And the only way to plug these bureaucratic loopholes that put me and people like me away is to apply pressure to have laws specifically plug those holes. And the other way is to build. And that's what I'm doing. And I don't want to advertise a ton of the stuff that I'm involved in just because I learned my lesson. But I am working very hard to advocate within the communities that I'm a part of in crypto to build things that will help us as a group. Help us have support, help us have legal defense. And hopefully make some changes to the systems and ultimately long-term replace the systems, because that's the goal of this whole thing anyway, is building viable governance rails that make us less dependent on the state.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I can definitely get behind. Now, how much do you think the economic pressure elements are going to play into the whole space moving forward? So, for example, there's probably a lot of people in Congress and the Senate, and et cetera, who have crypto bags and who have invested. There's a lot of rich people in their states, constituents that are putting pressure on them. But also, just the fact that crypto is so easy to do anywhere in the world, that so much, especially with the kind of the rise of the expansion of BRICS and the petrodollar's kind of decline, there's a lot of like booming opportunity outside of the U.S. and losing power. I mean, obviously the ideal for, I guess, the state's power would be to have the dollar remain on top and the U.S. remain on top. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like those two things are going to happen, for at least unfortunately for them. So all this outside pressure of like, look at all this money you and your constituents are going to be losing out on if you don't make crypto friendly in the U.S. Do you think that's going to play a significant role, or are you a little bit more pessimistic on that?
I am trying not to be pessimistic. I'll preface everything I say with that. I think that the government is going to have to, the state as we know it, is going to have to be slapped a lot harder by reality before it makes that switch. If you look at what the moves that they are telegraphing right now, they are scrambling, but more or less in complete denial about the reality of the BRICS thing and the reality of Saudi Arabia and Iran going off of the petrodollar as well. I mean, that's the whole game right there. Now, the way that the United States stays on top and their delusion doesn't become reality is if both of these efforts are technical failures, which is a very real possibility because the United States is not ready to launch Fed now. Um, I mean, I haven't talked
Say
to.
3 months from now, they're saying.
I mean, the last time I gave a speech at a Federal Reserve event was in 2019, and they could barely spell blockchain. They were trying to learn, but they didn't, but they were not in any position to create anything closely resembling a public ledger at that point. And they um, none of the technologies are. I mean, at best, they're going to be able to create a SQL database that does something close to some sort of digital currency, but you know they've got so much ground to make up. I just don't see it happening by summertime. And that's what they're trying to announce is this Fed Now thing as a response to BRICS. It's a pipe dream.
Hmm.
So I think their best bet is not launching Fed Now. Their best bet is somehow sabotaging BRICS. And then if and when any of that fails, that's when they're going to start to turn their lonely eyes to crypto. And fortunately for them, the United States is in a great position. I think that report just came out that we have like 3x or 4x the mining power for Bitcoin in the United States versus what exists in Russia in terms of megawattage applied to mining. That's a great start. There was a Pentagon report that came out maybe a week or two ago from from a general research team that talked about investing in mining as a defensive asset against monetary infrastructure attacks.
Hmm.
So, like, there are little bright spots of hope. Not to mention, like Emmer and Loomis and people in the halls of the legislature that are bag holders and standard bearers. So there's some bright spots of hope, but unfortunately, it's surrounded right now by a dark cloud of not just anti-crypto sentiment, but anti-innovation sentiment. I mean, you've got Senator Warren, who's supposedly a banking reformer, running on the slogan, "I am assembling an anti-crypto army," and reasonably thinking that might actually win her some votes.
Well, we'll see how that turns out. I guess that's a big litmus test of
Exactly.
where we're at in the next few years.
The fact that she thinks it can work is a troubling development. Whether it actually does work is going to be the litmus test for sure.
Yeah, it's in that particular case that might be a bit of nuance with that because she might just feel extremely safe and be running on that platform as a way of getting a lot of banking donations and things like that, just raising money and losing some votes, but not nearly enough votes to actually cost her an election.
Yeah, yeah. And it's hard for an incumbent to lose, but it's also couched in this general populist sentiment that's anti-crypto, anti-AI for entirely predictable reasons if you look at the cycles. But
Hmm.
it's just there's a confluence of things that are happening that is affecting the public perception of the entire innovation sector. You got SVB Bank collapsing, which is it's unfortunate that it was SVB first because it's really every bank that finds himself in that situation. It's just they went down first because they're the biggest. You've got San Francisco, which was once a cradle of innovation, now has more crime per square mile than any other part of the United States. So innovation is fleeing its borders, and we don't have a beacon on the hill that represents, American ingenuity.
You're not an
You've got
Austin maximalist, are you?
no, not at all. I'm in Dallas, man.
Yeah.
But we've also got you got this anti-AI backlash, which to me is genetically, mimetically the same thing as this crypto and anti-NFT, anti-DeFi backlash that was nurtured over the boom, the bull cycle, led by all those people that just made their entire personality as I hate crypto. You know, uh, I won't mention their names to elevate them, but we all know who I'm talking about.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, this has been quite the enlightening chat. I hope people really learn a whole lot from it. You mentioned there's a lot of stuff you're working on that you don't want to show, but what do you want to show? Maybe your Twitter account?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I'm always shooting my mouth off on Twitter, so I'm at Rizzn there. I am working here at this amazing studio. It's called Harper Belmont. My background is in media, so if I can't do crypto, I'm going to do media, and I'm probably going to talk about crypto here anyway. So, but it's a great podcast studio that does a lot of live event coverage and all the cool TikToks and the reels and all types of things that podcasts sort of filter down into. And then I'm involved in tons of little DAOs and projects and efforts all over the internet. So whatever I'm talking about on Twitter is probably what I'm involved in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thanks very much for being on, and hope you have a good one.
Hey, thank you.